big polluters and who takes a perverse joy in destroying American government from the inside. Mr. President, I see that the Majority Leader has come to the floor, asked unanimous consent that when he is concluded and I pick my remarks back up, my remarks be linked back together as if they had been made without interruption.
Without objection.
With that, I yield the floor to the Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank the Senator from Rhode Island for yielding. I'll be very quick here. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate now proceed to the in-block consideration of the following resolutions which are at the desk: SRES 427, SRES 428, SRES 429.
Is there an objection to proceeding en bloc? Without objection, the Senate will proceed en bloc.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the resolutions be agreed to, the preambles be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered made, laid upon the table, all in block.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Judiciary be discharged from further consideration. The Senate now proceed to SRES 396.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 396, condemning the tragic act of violence on September 10, 2025 in Evergreen, Colorado, and so forth.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, October the 1st, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal proceedings be approved today at the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for the use later in the day. Morning business be closed, and Senate resume consideration of calendar number 115, S2296.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, for the information of my colleagues, senators should expect 3 votes at 11 a.m. and further votes later in the day. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order following the remarks of my colleagues.
Without objection. The Senator from Rhode Island.
So there will be misery ahead for most normal people, not counting the weird ones who like inflicting pain and doing damage for the benefit of a bunch of creepy right-wing billionaires who've propped them up their whole lives. And the reason we're here is really twofold. One, as they've shown during the Trump regime, Republicans really don't want to govern. They want to rule. They don't want to talk to Democrats, even where they need our votes. Here they need our votes. And yet, what have we been offered to get those votes? Nothing. Not even discussions. The president only met with the Democratic leaders just yesterday. And he didn't seem to be aware of what was at stake here for the Americans who are about to lose a huge health care benefit. They just go wildly forward. We've seen it over and over again here on the Senate floor. How many times in just the few months that we've been here in this administration have Republicans done the thing that they were furious when we even talked about doing, to overrule the parliamentarian and change the rules to make things easier for themselves rather than negotiate with us? My count is 4 already. 4! And we're only 9 months in. They don't want to govern. They don't want to talk to us. They want to rule. They want to dictate to us. And at the same time, the other reason we're here is that there's this strange Republican fixation with taking health care away from people. I do not understand it. There are lots of Republican constituents who really depend on Medicaid, who really feel great that they're on Medicare, who really have their family budgets made possible by the credits from the Affordable Care Act. It's not like Democrats get the benefit of this. Everybody gets the benefit of this. And yet, what have we been put through just in these months? $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid. $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid. Already, hospitals and nursing homes and doctors' practices are reeling at what those cuts mean for their financial viability. Medicare, $500 billion in cuts, hidden in the bill in a tricky way so that the cuts come through sequestration and nobody has to own them. They can do a Pontius Pilate hand wash of the cuts. Well, no, we saw what you did. You own it. It's a $500 billion cut to Medicare. And why you would want to do that, I cannot imagine, but that's what you did. And now we have these cuts to people receiving help, paying for their health care under the Affordable Care Act. It's going to be about 40,000 Rhode Islanders. These aren't people who have loads of money. Their premiums are going to, on average, double or better. I mentioned a retired mental health counselor yesterday. She's going to have $477 in added expense every single month because of this. And it all starts now. It all starts happening now. So when we're told, why are we forcing the issue now? It's because now is when the issue is upon us. When we're told, why don't we negotiate later? My question is, why aren't we negotiating now? Why would we believe when we're told that you'll negotiate later on this when you won't negotiate now on this? Now when you need our votes, you won't negotiate on something that you say you'll negotiate later? Why does that make any sense? Why is that even remotely credible? The harm starts now. The negotiations should start now. And frankly, what Democrats are asking for is something you ought to be doing anyway, just to help your own constituents. This shouldn't be hard at all. We should not be here having this conversation. This should have been resolved already, except that the Republican majority wants to rule, not govern, and they have this strange fixation with taking away health care, even from their own constituents. Over and over again, we've seen it. We've seen it with the repeated overrulings of the parliamentarian. We've seen it with the Beautiful for Billionaires bill that got rammed through with a simple majority. We've seen it with the change in the rules to allow 100 nominees to go through at a time under advice and consent. We have seen it with clean air standards that help everyone being repealed over and over and over again. The Republicans take the path that allows them to rule, not to govern, that allows them to ignore the minority party even when they need our votes, even when what we're asking for is in their constituents' interests, even when what we're asking for is something that their constituents want. Even then, we're up against this blockade. So I hope that Republicans come to their senses. I hope that the president realizes what he is doing and that we can put an end to this shutdown as quickly as possible. But let me make this absolutely clear. This is a shutdown that lands entirely at the feet of the Republican Party that controls the Senate, that controls the House, that controls the presidency, that won't negotiate with Democrats even when it needs our votes, and that has an unhealthy fixation with taking away health care from their fellow Americans. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Delaware is recognized.
Madam President, I'm asking why we're here. Why we're here on the floor of the Senate as the hours tick down to the end of the federal fiscal year and the shutdown of the federal government. I've served here 15 years. I've seen my share of shutdowns, and I know how much they hurt. How much they hurt the men and women of our military, federal law enforcement, folks who serve and protect our country at home and abroad. And they should not have to wonder when or if they'll get paid. A shutdown isn't good for our reputation abroad and our cohesion at home. I have always worked to find some path, some deal, some way to keep the government open. And I've talked to a dozen colleagues in recent days about this fight and about tonight. This is about health care. This is about my party saying enough is enough. We know that if you have health care, everything else can work itself out. And if you don't have your health, almost nothing else matters. President Trump ran on making America healthy again, on reducing prices, on making life easier for the working people of our country and their families. And instead, what we've seen is decision after decision, action after action by President Trump and the Republicans in Congress that raises prices on health care, on insurance, on drugs, on medications, whether it's the tariffs being imposed on prescription medications or the decision to end subsidies that keep health insurance affordable, or it's laying off thousands of researchers working to help cure pediatric cancer or address ALS or do research into HIV/AIDS, decision after decision that moves us in the wrong direction, that makes us sicker, poorer, and more divided. I'm usually one of the first to walk across the aisle and say, let's find a solution, let's find a way out of this, and I've been doing that in recent days, talking with colleagues. But I can't see a way forward if we can't change direction and together say to the people we serve, we want to help with your health care. We want to stop the cuts to NIH and CDC. We want to reduce the increases in health insurance costs. We want to help you and your family. In my home state of Delaware, emergency room wait times are too long. And as millions of Americans get thrown off of health insurance, they're going to go to the emergency room. And those wait times will get longer and longer for all of us. Next month, we're going to find out how much health insurance premiums go up. For some Americans, they're going to double, but for all of us, they will go up. Healthcare is getting costlier, and Americans are getting sicker. So why am I standing on this floor tonight saying I'm not voting to keep this government open? Because enough is enough. There are ways we can and should work together to change direction, to put on the floor the bipartisan health appropriations bill that'll restore tens of billions of dollars to the NIH and CDC, that'll stop Trump's cuts to American health care and insurance and research. There's a path towards reforming and extending the Affordable Care Act that both parties should agree on. But folks, if you're listening, your member of Congress needs to hear from you, needs to know that you want us to work together to reverse course and end Trump's tragic cuts to health care. If my colleagues don't get those calls, they won't change direction. If they don't change direction, we won't reopen this government. Make no mistake, we have Republicans in control of the House and Senate and the White House. If they want to find a way forward that reduces the harm to Americans and our health care, we can. And I'll be one of the first to extend my hand to find that path. But if we don't change direction, we shouldn't reopen this government, because Americans have taken too many hits already, too much additional cost, too much cuts to health care research, too much increase to health insurance costs. This is a fight about America's health care, and we're fighting for you. Thank you. With that, I yield the floor.
The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Minnesota.
Madam President, I have 7 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Thank you. Madam President, as my colleague from Delaware just noted, we are here today because Republicans have created a healthcare crisis for millions of Americans. And like the senator from Delaware, I am someone that works across the aisle all the time. I have one of the best records for bipartisan bills, and I think that's an important part of our governing, and that is to find common ground. You don't always pick your neighbors, but you find a way to live next to your neighbors. You find a way to work with them. And what is so unfortunate about what's going on tonight is that didn't happen here. There was no crossing over the fence with some coffee for the neighbors to try to have a meeting, to try to work this out. In fact, it was Senator Schumer and Leader Jeffries that had a request time and time again that got canceled on a meeting with the president. There is still time to continue to negotiate, but not if they're just going to say, hey, this healthcare thing, it's not a problem. Well, maybe we can deal with it in December. First of all, who would believe that when Donald Trump just decides one thing one day or posts something on Truth Social and then everyone changes what they agreed to, which has happened time and time again. So that's one reason it's not reality unless he's at the table. Number 2, it's not reality because this is not a December problem. This is not a January problem. This is a now problem. November 1st, that's when people start re-enrolling. Whole bunch of small businesses, 20 million people, more than a quarter of the farmers in this country who are already facing, as one of my farmers said to me last week, a perfect storm of ugly. That's about the tariffs, that's about their input costs with fertilizer, and that's about their personal health care costs. A perfect storm of ugly. When you're in a big storm in Minnesota, you don't just go outside and hold an umbrella and think maybe it'll go away. You do something about it then. You take cover then. You help people take cover then. That's not what they're doing with this vote tonight. We have a bill that would help millions of Americans sleep easier. We're still dealing with the tariffs. We're still going to push on that, which has led to all of these grocery cost increases. We see what's happening with the electricity cost increase. Costs are up, chaos is up, and corruption is up. But there is one thing we can do, and that's one of the biggest cost drivers when we look at inflation, and that is health care. So let's start with how we got here. We know that over 110 million Americans depend on Medicare and Medicaid. 110 million. These programs cover everything from hospital visits to life-saving prescriptions to the long-term care that allows seniors to remain in their homes. And these programs, along with Social Security and SNAP, which is the nutrition program, have driven poverty among seniors for years to record lows. Best poverty-fighting program there is, Medicare, Medicaid. But the budget that congressional Republicans passed earlier this summer without our votes, again, didn't listen to us, makes the biggest cut in history to Medicare and Medicaid. That's right, the biggest cut in history, while all these other costs are going up. Their budget cut Medicaid by over $1 trillion and will trigger more than $500 billion in Medicare cuts. How does that happen? Because they didn't put, well, the debt is so high from that bill because of the $1 trillion in tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans and the $1 trillion in tax cuts and giveaways for corporations, that it actually automatically triggered $500 billion in Medicare cuts on hospitals. So when we go, as we did, our members on the Democratic side last week, and met with people in hospitals and patients and doctors and nurses, we heard about that. We heard about the 15 million Americans that are going to get shoved off their health care. But the one thing they could have done, and they voted against it once, but we know behind closed doors are very interested in doing something about this, it is the tax credits to help people afford their health insurance. Without these tax credits, more than 20 million Americans will see their premiums skyrocket. Kaiser study just today came out. Double the premiums, double the premiums. That's why one of my hospitals told me, look, of course Medicaid hits us hard, of course Medicare does, but so many of our patients and the people who visit our clinic are on MNsure, that's the Affordable Care Act plan in my state, that if this happens, a whole bunch of them won't be able to afford it. Then they're going to show up in our emergency rooms, they're going to show up without insurance, they're not going to get the surgeries that they need, and they're not going to do their doctor's visits. That's why you've seen some Republicans, some overtly saying, we've got to do something about this. They shouldn't be talking about off-ramps. They should be talking about how to get their constituents off a cliff. Earlier this year, we marked the 60th anniversary of Medicare and Medicaid. As we look back at this monumental achievement, we should be strengthening health care in this country, not undermining it. We made progress, right? Capping out-of-pocket costs, passing my bill to allow Medicare to finally negotiate for better prices, making health care more affordable. But we should be building on that progress because the status quo is not okay for people right now. We should be building on that progress by making improvements to these programs, not making them harder. So we are calling on our Republican colleagues to pass our bill. And if they can bring themselves to do that, or at least to sit in a room and negotiate and actually get this done, the president prides himself in the art of the deal, well, show us the deal. Don't say you don't need our votes, because you just found out tonight that you do. They need our colleagues to stop taking cues from a guy who, after a meeting about one of the most important moments in his presidency, puts out a deep fake video, offensive, making fun of the leaders. Who does that? What other president has done something like that when they're actually in a negotiation? This isn't political theater. These are real people, like the woman at Senator Shaheen's spotlight hearing today, who was from Maine, and she is going to talk to her doctor, literally met with her doctor to say, okay, I can't afford these increases, so how do I manage to ration my medication for MS? And the doctor said, it doesn't work like that. The pressure will build in your brain. Well, I hope the pressure from the public, when they see what's going on, is going to build. And we're starting to see it all over the country right now. This is not the time to just accept the status quo and say we can't do anything about it while our constituents are going off that premium cliff. So maybe the president needs to get out and talk to that farmer whose soybean market has dried up. Now he's not going to be able to afford his health insurance, and see that perfect storm of ugly. He's not going to meet those people on the golf course in Mar-a-Lago. I can tell you that right now. He needs to get out there. And it's time to start taking cues and listen to real people and not memes and not fake deep fake videos. This is not a joke. Our bill is a path forward, and we ask them to come to the table and negotiate with us. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam President, I rise today because I literally just about 2 minutes ago finished a telephone town hall with over 5,000 people back home in New Jersey that joined up to try to figure out what in the world is happening to our government right now when they see just this abdication of leadership from the White House to leadership here in Congress to step up right now at a time of need. Thousands of people from across New Jersey that had called in worried about how this shutdown is going to affect their lives, how the healthcare costs that they are going to be experiencing are going to reshape their ability to be able to deliver care for those that need care the most. The simple story is they're scared. The people I talked to, they were nervous about what comes next. And frankly, they're pissed off about this. They know that this is not how a government should function. They know that, yes, we need to be able to step up and have negotiations, but how can you have negotiations when one chamber of this Congress isn't even showing up to work this week? That's right. When I told them about how Speaker Johnson didn't even bring the House of Representatives to work this week, even though they were supposed to, they were furious. If we're going to ask public servants to show up to work tomorrow, if we're going to ask our military to show up to work tomorrow without getting paid, the least that our Republicans in the House of Representatives can do is show up to work here. We should be furious about this. It's an abdication of leadership. It is a dereliction of duty. It is one of the most shameful things that I've seen in terms of just giving up on something that is so important, is going to have so much impact on so many people across this country. What I heard is they want us to be the adults in the room, to sit together, to be able to have the kind of dialogue. But instead, what we see is just this posturing and back and forth from Donald Trump, from leadership on the Republican side that hold the gavels here. And yes, the Republicans control the White House, they control the Senate, they control the House of Representatives, and the American people know that, and they know who is at fault for where we stand right now, that we are all about 3 hours away from a government shutdown. And this is something that I take personally. As someone who worked as a career civil servant before, I told my constituents today how I worked as a civil servant. I worked through multiple shutdowns before. Of course, I don't want to see us get to this place, and this should be an absolute last resort. But again, when they're not even bothering to show up to work, we know where their priorities land, that they have been moving towards this and barreling our country towards this for a long time now. So my constituents have every bit a right to be feeling pissed off about this. Because after we were already going through this in March, they see government once again not working for them. And they're right. Where have the attempts been over the past few months to work together to avoid this scenario? And again, it's not just about process. I don't want people to think that this is just some tug of war, that this is just some battle for political power, that this is just some challenge between political parties for who has the momentum on their side. There's real struggle. And I heard that on this town hall. We had people like Letitia from Camden who said that with the prices so high, quote, every choice feels like a sacrifice and the stress is constant. It's affecting how they're able to hold up and how they feel when they wake up every morning, what keeps them up at night. Still, she remains determined to advocate for families like hers who deserve stability, dignity, and hope. Or an urgent call from Barbara, who begged us not to back down from this fight. Laura from Brick, who called and urged Democrats not to back down from this fight, and being able to say how concerned she was for just regular citizens to be able to make things easier for everyone impacted. She was asking, how can she help? She's asking, how can she help those that are struggling from the shutdown? She frankly wants to do more than what Speaker Johnson is doing on the other side of this building. Or people like Mick from Toms River, who although was trying to be an informed citizen and learn what was going on, was having trouble figuring out fact from fiction regarding this budget because it's just the sheer amount of disinformation and lies that we see out there in political rhetoric. Lies that are blatantly trying to smear and make it difficult for the American people to understand what's at stake. So yes, when we hear the Speaker of the House talking about how this funding, that this is Democrats that are trying to cut resources from FEMA or make it harder for people to get care through the WIC program for women, infants, and children. Well, look, it's just deception. Because what we already know is that that reconciliation bill that was passed, this is something that is estimated to potentially affect 3 million people, preventing them from getting care through the WIC program already. 3 million out of 8 million that get care now. So who is it that's actually hurting people's ability to get those services? And FEMA? Are you kidding me? I literally heard it out of the mouth of the president and the Homeland Security Secretary that they want to abolish FEMA. And here we are hearing it from the speaker, making it seem like the blame is over here. These are things these are issues that people understand, like Jody from Manchester, who is concerned that with all the rising prices, that she'll have to choose between being able to afford food or medicine, because costs are simply too high for her to be able to afford both. No one in this country, the richest, most powerful country in the world, should ever have to make that kind of trade-off. Yet we see right now, we're on the cusp of it, not just 3 hours away from a shutdown, but over the course of tomorrow and the coming days, Americans all over this country will be getting their new bills when it comes to health care. And we see that tens of millions of them will have to pay more, possibly double what they're already paying. Over 4.5 million Americans to lose their care, including many in New Jersey. That is a catastrophe that we see coming. We knew it was coming, and we were trying to take action to be able to address that. And what happened? Kicking the can down the road. When does open enrollment start when it comes to healthcare? Starts in November. So what good is it if we punt towards Thanksgiving, which is what this body tried to do? They need solutions now. They need answers now. And they're not getting it, and they're certainly not seeing anything that resembles leadership in this country right now. So yes, when I'm hearing from Lorena from Forked River, who says that, literally could lose her current health insurance if the ACA premiums go away, that's what we're fighting for. That's what I hope people see over the coming period as this continues on. Because I know it's so easy to make it feel like, again, it's just completely detached. And often it really seems that way. It feels like people here in the Senate, here in Congress, at the White House, that we're playing with other people's chips, that we don't feel it ourselves. I have to say, I found it disgusting when I learned in 2019 and I came into Congress that the president and members of Congress get paid during the shutdown, that they continue to get their salary while service members in our military and other public servants do not, even though they are showing up to do the work. We should not be held to a different standard. We should not be in a place where it seems like we're above the rest. Because that's exactly what the rest of the American people believe. They believe that we think that we're above the law, that we don't have to obey it, that we don't have to follow the rules that other people do, and that's why they are losing trust in this government. And I can tell you, come midnight today, they have every bit reason to believe that, because we have failed to ability to be able to deliver for so many people. We had Lucinda from Whiting write in telling us, begging us to hold the line when it comes to fighting for health care. Because in her words, quote, I definitely cannot afford my ACA insurance without the advanced premium tax credits. If costs go up and health care gets more expensive, I will have to go without insurance and not go to the doctor. These are just a fraction of the thousands of calls and emails and outreach that we've received. We asked people to share their stories. We got over 3,500 stories back just this week about people's concerns about what's happening with this shutdown and losing health care. We need to recognize that a president who can't even be bothered to learn about the hurt that is being put forward by his own party when it comes to our health care, that our bill is not one that is looking out for them. We need leaders who understand what is going on. We need leaders who care about the people they are supposed to be leading. We need leaders who will actually be the adults in the room. And yes, so I rise today to make that promise to New Jersey and to the American people that I will keep fighting for you and fight with you as we go through this. And we're going through uncertain times. We're entering unprecedented times. And I know that it's a lot for everyone. But again, we remember why we fight here. That while I'm giving this speech, I'm worried about the care that my father's getting and my father's health is declining rapidly. Every single one of us knows what it's like to have a loved one struggling when it comes to their care. And I know everyone knows that experience of saying that we would try to move heaven and earth to be able to make sure that they get the care that they need in their time of greatest need. And how can I, when I stand by thinking about 4.5 million Americans, including many in my state, losing health care, making it harder for them to be able to deliver for their family, how can I say that this is a time to roll over, that this is a time to stand down? No. We draw the line here. We fight for your health care. We fight for your lives, your ability to deliver for your loved ones, and to be able to stand up together and say, this is not how our government should work. This is not how our democracy should function. We deserve better. The American people deserve better, and that's what we're going to fight for. We're going to fight for better. With that, I yield back the floor.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.